Kalorama, a recorded books Highbridge imprint presents Hamas, The Quest for Power by Beverley Milton-Edwards and Stephen Farrell, read by Hannibal Hills. Preface. There is no middle ground with Hamas. In the decades since the Islamist organization emerged from the crucible of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, it has polarized opinion and will continue to do so. Hamas's credo can be defined simply as Islam is the solution. It offers an Islamic plan to Palestinians living under an Israeli military occupation, wrapping itself in the twin banners of religion and nationalism. Hamas's enemies define it as a terrorist organization that has killed and maimed Israelis for decades, and perpetrating by far its deadliest attack on 7th October 2023. They argue that it is little more than the proxy of a regional Middle East power, Iran, and shares with its patron an all-consuming desire to bring about the destruction of the State of Israel. Hamas's supporters see it through another prism entirely. For them, it is an uncompromising yet clear-sighted organization founded by a leadership which spent decades in the political wilderness telling the unpopular truth that the political orthodoxies of their time were misguided, and that, in Israel, the Palestinian people faced an enemy that had to be resisted, not accommodated. Hamas argues that it alone is prepared to stand up to win statehood and independence for the Palestinians. But it ill behoves either enemy or friend to make simplistic generalizations about an organization that, whatever its true nature, in 2006 became the first Islamist movement to ascend to power in the Middle East by democratic means, and 2 decades later demonstrated that it had the strategic capacity to deliver a humiliating body blow to a military machine that claims to be the best in the Middle East. It is neither ISIS, Al-Qaeda, nor the Taliban. It owes something to Hezbollah and much to the Muslim Brotherhood. It is Islamist, but nationalist, Sunni yet supported by a Shia power, has participated in democratic elections yet remains opaque, and populist yet cruel. Many see Hamas as a significant obstacle to peace with Israel and wider hopes for stability in the Middle East. Others, particularly in the global South, believe that, until it is recognized as a legitimate political force and included in the accommodation of power, there can never be peace in the region. To study is not to support. For enemies and friends, and in both camps passions often cloud reasoned debate, Hamas, the Islamic resistance movement, is a phenomenon worthy of analysis. Part political, part social, part military, it has proved adaptable and resilient in the face of opposition from regional and world superpowers. It has won parliamentary, municipal, student and professional elections, and it has emerged as a genuine threat to much longer established Palestinian political movements. The purpose of this book, through hundreds of interviews conducted over 4 decades, is to present first-hand accounts of Hamas's founders, leaders, fighters, social activists, victims, political supporters and opponents, and in so doing to give insights into how Hamas was born, grew, and thrived in the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem, the Palestinian territories occupied and controlled through Israel's all-pervasive military, settlement, and civil apparatus since the 1967 Six-Day War. Many of the interviews with the founders and senior leadership of Hamas can never be repeated. Such leaders are dead, mostly assassinated in Israel's attempts over the decades to degrade and destroy the senior leadership of the organization. Other interviews are with leaders who rarely speak in public. Hamas cannot be understood in isolation from other Islamist actors who preceded it. Context, no matter how controversial, does matter. There has been a history of Muslim opposition to foreign rule and occupation since the British were awarded political control of Palestine after the First World War, and the Zionists sought to make their homeland there. Its roots lie in the radicalism of little-known Islamist sheikhs in the 1930s, who called for jihad to liberate Palestine long before the word entered the Western lexicon. A generation later, refugees of the First Arab-Israeli War of 1948-9 came to believe that, through a pious adherence to Islam, they could achieve political freedom and create a state ruled according to their Islamic principles. After the 1967 war, some of these early Islamists were tolerated, encouraged even, by Israel. Under the age-old principle of divide and rule, Israel saw in the fledgling Islamists an opportunity to undermine its then principal Palestinian enemy, Yasser Arafat, head of Fatah and chief of the Palestine Liberation Organization, PLO. Out of these antecedents, the modern Hamas movement emerged in 1987 from the tumult of the First Palestinian Intifada uprising against Israel's then 20-year-old military occupation regime. Hamas claimed the Intifada in its name and embarked on a competition to wrest Palestinian hearts and minds from the PLO. It became a formidable foe, waging a murderous armed campaign of suicide bombings against Israel and, later, missile bombardment of Israeli towns. But Hamas has won support from Palestinians, not just because of what they see as a legitimate campaign of violent resistance against Israeli military occupation, but also because Hamas is, at one and the same time, a movement with a powerful, highly motivated, and well-organized social welfare network, which it used to support people during years of deprivation and enforced statelessness, earning their gratitude and trust. In this book, we detail the ways in which Hamas forged these links with the Palestinian people, slowly ousting the PLO from its hitherto unchallenged position of preeminence. Hamas has developed a powerful military wing and instilled in many Palestinians the belief that only through violent, armed struggle and the reward of martyrdom will they achieve their political goals of freedom and independence. In the 1990s and early 2000s, Hamas suicide bombing campaigns encouraged hundreds of willing volunteers to sacrifice themselves in a self-declared holy war in attacks on Israeli targets. Hamas leaders defended their actions, coldly warning that if Palestinian civilians continued to die at the hands of Israeli tank commanders, F-16 pilots and snipers, then Israel's civilians would suffer the same fate. In January 2006, Hamas won the Palestinian parliamentary elections, demonstrating that it could marshal its supporters, including thousands of women who turned out for rallies under the green banner of the movement. It also attracted the votes of many other Palestinians who were disillusioned by corruption in the Fatah-controlled Palestinian Authority, PA, and lack of progress in peace talks with Israel. The Western world refused to accept Hamas's victory at the ballot box, and Hamas refused to bow to the international community's demands that it should recognize Israel and renounce violence. The outcome was a double deadlock, internal and external, which saw a higher death toll and even more despair among Israelis and Palestinians about any prospect of a peace settlement. Internally, Islamist Hamas and secular Fatah consistently refused to share power, nor was this likely, given that each had forms of dependence on patrons with conflicting agendas, Iran and the United States. Two armed forces sharing a tiny slice of land, each ambitious for total control, was a dynamic that could not be contained. In 2007, just 18 months after it won the election, Hamas's armed forces routed Fatah in Gaza and seized full military control of the Gaza Strip. When the dust settled, there was a two-headed Palestinian authority, Hamas in Gaza and Fatah in the West Bank. Externally, there was also a standoff between Hamas and Israel, with the West supporting Israel. Israel sought to isolate Hamas with an economic and military blockade imposed on the whole population of the Gaza Strip. Hamas hit back with rockets into Israel. The nearest either side came to any form of agreement was a 6-month ceasefire, which ended in December 2008. Hamas immediately began firing hundreds of rockets into Israeli towns and villages, and Israel hit back with a 3-week military offensive which left more than 1,300 Palestinians and 13 Israelis dead. Gaza was shattered, but Hamas remained in power and as defiant as ever. This cycle of attack and counterattack between the two sides continued in 2012, 2014, 2018, 2021, and of course, from 7th October 2023 into 2024. Hamas can be excoriated, but it should not be underestimated. As we demonstrate throughout this book, it rose from a Muslim Brotherhood seed planted in Mandate Palestine to become one of the most important Islamic and nationalist organizations in the Middle East. Its credentials mean that it is admired by Islamic and other liberation groups active not just in the Middle East, but in the wider global South and beyond. For them, Hamas's brand of religious nationalism echoes their own political aspirations more than the worldwide jihad of ISIS or Al-Qaeda. But it also highlights the consequences for the West of refusing to acknowledge the role that such movements play in shaping and governing their societies and influencing their relationship with the regional and global order. Militarily, Hamas is fatally exposed to the weakness of a hitherto far more powerful enemy, Israel. Israel has suffered huge losses at the hands of Hamas, and this legacy of harm and humiliation will endure to reshape the future of relations between Israelis and Palestinians. While it is true that Hamas cannot conquer Israel, questions still linger over whether Israel can achieve its aim of eradicating Hamas. Past attempts to degrade and destruct killed neither the movement nor the idea behind it. 1. What is Hamas? We will come to you, God willing, in a roaring flood. We will come to you with endless rockets. We will come to you in a limitless flood of soldiers. Yahya Sinwar. Shortly after dawn in southern Israel, and music from an all-night festival lingers in the air. Suddenly, the peace of a holiday Sabbath is broken by sirens, harbingers of incoming rockets from nearby Gaza. Soon, there's a buzzing in the sky. But this time it isn't surveillance drones monitoring the 2.3 million Palestinians trapped behind Israel's fortified border that seals off the Gaza Strip from the outside world. Instead, it's the unimaginable sight of motorized paragliders soaring over the gates of Gaza, bearing armed militants belonging to the Palestinian group Harakat al-Muqawama al-Islamiyya, better known to the world as Hamas. A fusillade of gunfire soon alerts residents of border kibbutzim that the rockets were cover for a concerted sea, air, and ground attack orchestrated by Hamas, unprecedented in its scale. In full view of the Israeli watchtowers and automated gun turrets, coordinated groups of Hamas militants blow holes in the Israeli fortifications and attack the military bases and checkpoints along Israel's 37-mile land border with Gaza. As scores of gunmen overwhelm Israel's defenses, around 3,000 Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and other raiders pour through breaches of the fence in pickup trucks, on tractors, and on motorbikes. Armed with automatic weapons and rocket-propelled grenade launchers, some set up bandit checkpoints on roads to seal off the area. Emptying their magazines into passing cars, they drag survivors out and finish them off in the street. Some use body cameras to record the carnage and later stream it worldwide, making real life and real death look like a first-person shooter video game. With the roads sealed, raiding parties storm into Israeli border villages such as Nativ Hassara, Kfar Aza, Nanim, Be'eri, Na'al Oz, and Re'im. Using guns, knives, machetes, grenades, and even garden tools, they hunt down and kill, including pensioners, women, children, migrant workers, security forces, and paramedics. Even, especially, Israeli military bases were attacked. The Army's Gaza divisional headquarters near Re'im, the Nahal Oz surveillance post, and the huge Erez checkpoint in the north. Larger border towns such as Sderot also fall prey to the assault, Israelis locking themselves inside their homes as armed groups drive around the streets, taking over the police station and killing dozens inside. On Black Saturday, I was in my home in Narim when terrorists infiltrated the kibbutz and homes. While they set fires, killed, kidnapped, looted, and vandalized, we hid in the safe room, recalled Israeli survivor Avi Dabush. The only weapon we had against the terrorists, who gathered under our window for long minutes and hours attempting to break into our house, was my sweaty hand on the door of the safe room. It is a horror that is hard to put into words, and it lasted for 8 hours. As the scale of the assault emerges, the Israeli military escalates the level of its alerts, first telling people to stay near protected areas, then to remain in their homes, before, at 8:23 a.m. on 7th of October 2023, declaring a state of alert for war. All on the Jewish high holiday of Simchat Torah. By the time the sun rose again the following day, a new reality was also dawning. Hamas had carried out the deadliest ever attack on Israel in a single day. They killed more than 1,200 people, including 36 children. Families were hunted down in their homes. More than 300 youngsters attending the Nova Music Festival were killed as gunmen emptied magazines into tents and toilet cubicles and hunted others down as they fled. One victim was beheaded on film. Others were mutilated. At least 240 were kidnapped and taken into Gaza as hostages, humiliated on camera as they were led into captivity. Police opened investigations to assess the sexual violence reported. Massacring civilians is a war crime, and there can be no justification for these reprehensible attacks, declared Agnes Kalorama, the Secretary-General of Amnesty International. Armed men shooting at civilians and dragging people away as hostages. Armed men parading a woman through central Gaza like a scene from a nightmare. All civilians who were abducted, including children, must be released immediately. These crimes must be investigated as part of the International Criminal Court's ongoing investigation into the crimes committed. Israelis were left feeling humiliated vengeful, and enraged at being made to feel fearful in one of the strongest military nations in the Middle East. Not only at the shock of what Hamas had done, but disbelief at the magnitude of the failure by the political, military, and intelligence leadership of Israel, a world leader in surveillance technology that was supposed to be able to detect threats in advance. "This is Israel's 9/11, and Israel will do everything to bring our sons and daughters back home," said Gilad Erdan, the country's ambassador to the United Nations, outside a Security Council meeting on the 8th of October. "We will not let the world forget the atrocities our country suffered." Hamas, so it appeared, hadn't forgotten either, basing their justification for what they called Operation Al-Aqsa Flood on both historic and legitimate grievances. Usama Hamdan, a member of Hamas's political bureau, told one of the authors, "It doesn't matter what Israel's military capacity or power is. The Palestinian people will achieve their liberation." Pressed on why Hamas attacked Israeli civilians that day, Hamdan restated the long-standing Hamas position that all of historic Palestine belonged to the Palestinians. "The whole world knows and recognizes that our land has been occupied since 1948. Israel occupied our whole, complete land, from the river to the sea. Israel has built settlements on these Palestinian territories. Those are settlements on our occupied land. Hamas considers these all to be settlements that deny the Palestinians their rights. These are settlements that Israel has built on stolen land, homes, and futures of our people." Gaza. Forced to put aside for the moment the domestic political fallout that would inevitably come for those in charge during such a security debacle, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government launched a devastating air, sea, and land bombardment of the Gaza Strip, calling it Operation Swords of Iron. The barrage turned into a full-scale ground invasion that redrew the map of Gaza and hit the reset button on Israeli-Palestinian relations, probably forever. Through the winter of 2023 and into 2024, more than 35,000 Palestinians were killed, most of them children and women. By November 2023, as the United Nations Security Council debated the situation in Gaza, briefers fed through situation reports from the ground. Catherine Russell, the executive director of the United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, called for an urgent humanitarian ceasefire. Drawing attention to the plight of children, she stated, "No place is safe in the Gaza Strip," then went on to describe it as the world's most dangerous place for a child to be. She ended by noting that an unprecedented 40% of killings in Gaza were of children. Tens of thousands more Palestinian civilians were injured, with little by way of functioning hospitals and the risk of being hit by missile attacks even inside the ones that still worked. As Israel razed apartment blocks, refugee camps, and neighborhoods, reducing much of Gaza to rubble, more than 2 million Palestinians were displaced from their homes. Israel's defense minister, Yoav Gallant, ordered a total closure of Gaza while the bombardment continued. "I have ordered a complete siege on the Gaza Strip. There will be no electricity, no food, no fuel. Everything is closed," he said. He was as good as his word, leaving humanitarian organizations struggling to deliver enough food and medical supplies through the one lifeline that Gaza still had to the outside world, to Egypt. Many Palestinians were forced into huge tent camps that sprang up in the south of the Gaza Strip as they fled near incessant bombing in the north. According to the International Rescue Committee, 6 weeks after Israel's bombardment began, civilians are bearing the brunt. Hamas has reportedly mixed military personnel and facilities with civilians and is holding over 200 hostages. Israel continues to use weapons with wide area effects in densely populated areas, is attacking hospitals, schools, and refugee camps, and has cut the supply of water, fuel, and electricity to over 2 million people. For older Palestinians, the scenes were a painful reminder of the tented refugee camps that they first lived in when they arrived in Gaza 75 years earlier as refugees from the 1948-9 war that accompanied the birth of the modern state of Israel. That mass dispossession saw around 750,000 Palestinians flee or forced from their homes in pre-1948 Palestine in a communal trauma known as the Nakba catastrophe, which became the defining experience of Palestinian identity. Future generations vowed never to repeat it, but with their apartment blocks, refugee camps, and neighborhoods reduced to rubble, they now found themselves bombed back into tents, and talk of a second Nakba became commonplace. Palestinians in the occupied West Bank also bore the brunt. United Nations human rights monitors said 300 were killed from the 7th of October to late December 2023, amid airstrikes and Israeli military raids on refugee camps and Palestinian cities. A report also found there had been a sharp rise in settler attacks, with an average of 6 incidents per day, such as shootings, burning of homes and vehicles, and uprooting of trees. Israel said the goal of its Gaza operation was to destroy Hamas's tunnel, rocket firing, and military infrastructure, specifically to kill the Hamas leaders who planned the 7th of October attack, military wing leader Mohammed Deif and Hamas's Gaza chief Yahya Sinwar. 10 months before the cross-border attack, Sinwar had publicly trailed hints of what was to come, but he veiled them in the kind of bellicose rhetoric that Hamas leaders had delivered from the rally lectern for decades, ensuring that it was a warning only fully appreciated in the aftermath. "We will come to you, God willing, in a roaring flood. We will come to you with endless rockets. We will come to you in a limitless flood of soldiers. We will come to you with millions of our people, like the repeating tide," he declaimed at a Gaza rally in December 2022. Particularly galling for Israel was that Sinwar, an implacable Hamas hardliner, had spent nearly a quarter of a century in Israeli jails until he was freed in a prisoner exchange in 2011. The day after his release, Sinwar told one of the authors that he had learned a lot about Israelis during his time in their custody, learning Hebrew and studying history. "We turned the prison into sanctuaries of worship and to academies for study," he said, with his customary sense of certainty and self-assurance. "You can say I am a specialist in the Jewish people's history, more than many of them." While Israel held the entire Hamas leadership responsible, Sinwar was singled out for special vilification. This heinous attack was orchestrated by Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas in the Gaza Strip, and so he and the entire system underneath him are dead men. "We will target them, break them, and dismantle their system," said Israel's chief of the General Staff, Lieutenant General Herzi Halevi, in an address to the nation a few days after the attack. "Gaza will not look the same. We will achieve a situation where those who led Gaza will suffer greatly, and we will dismantle it. and whoever remains there will understand that such a thing is not to be done to the state of Israel.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?